Unlock the hidden potential of your raw land. In this exclusive interview, Luis Jurado shares real-world success stories and critical mistakes to avoid in the land entitlement process. Here we go. We're talking from raw land to reality, and we're going to have a conversation with Luis Jurado, who is the president of Premier Design Solution. I've known Luis now for more than 10 years. Quite an adventure in a lot of projects that we've worked in the past. I respect Luis a lot. He's a real connoisseur in the industry, someone that I look up to, and we're excited to dig in a little more on the details of some of the projects. So Luis, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luis Jurado. I am the president of Premier Design Solutions, Inc., and I'm also the managing partner with Premier Development Solutions, LLC. I am a professional engineer with over 23 years of experience. Most of what I do is public infrastructure and land development and entitlements, two of my greatest passions. I know we're here to talk today about land development and entitlements. I think the passion started at a very early age. My dad, a civil engineer himself, always took me to his office, and I remember being 3-4 years old when he would tell me how to properly fold engineering plans, and I was very enthusiastic and very intrigued in seeing all these buildings and structures in these plans. And for me, it was like reading a comics book. So I fell in love with the profession at a very early age. By probably 9-10 years old, I knew I wanted to be a civil engineer, and that's what I became. Also, I truly believe that the passion, I like to make an analogy with a lot of the people that know me, those close to me, and even to those that don't know me. I think land development and entitlement is very similar to that of an artist painting a drawing. So you have the artist with an empty canvas, and he's got the choice of going with acrylic paint or water-based paint. And then there's all these different types of brushes and the threads on the brushes. But at the end, he's regulated by the materials that he has. And he has to work with that and get the best out of it. And there goes his masterpiece. And I truly believe that land development and entitlement is the same way. We start working with an empty piece of property. We are regulated by the zoning codes, by the state and federal regulations. We are regulated by access, by densities, by zoning. So at the end of the day, we do the same thing. We go to work with all these regulations and build our own masterpiece. So I think this is really what I'm truly passionate about, having inherited it from my dad and clearly having the ability to go work on a masterpiece every time I have the opportunity to do so.
That's what I love about working with you, because we get us as land brokers, we just find you the opportunities and then I pass them to you and immediately see the opportunity that we have on that canvas, like you said so well. Talk to us a little bit about your work with the city, because that's also very interesting. I remember when you were working for the city of Fort Lauderdale, going through that transformation that they had in their infrastructure, how you helped them and how you saw the future that was going to happen in there.
The public infrastructure is strictly or very directly related to land development. A developer, an investor is not going to come and buy a piece of property if the proper infrastructure is not in place for it to be developed. We follow public infrastructure, or we understand where public infrastructure is going to happen. And by public infrastructure, I mean public roadways, public transportation, I mean education in schools. We talk about water and wastewater. So when you start seeing the capital improvements coming into areas, you know that what we're preparing for is for future land development and entitlement. You talked about City of Fort Lauderdale, which through a county project that we worked on, we did an assessment for the City of Fort Lauderdale on the sidewalk improvement project. So we surveyed over 400 miles of sidewalk. So we had to walk areas that at the time were not fully developed, potentially were going to be developed. And that's how I learned about the West Fort Lauderdale development project that we're working together, which I'm going to elaborate a little bit more in this podcast. But clearly having that direct connection between public infrastructure and development, it's a plus because it tells you exactly what pieces of property are going to be more valuable than the others.
So you know what, now that you have talked about Fort Lauderdale, I would love for you to share that success story of what was done in that area per se as a project.
What we did as a company, Premier Development Solutions Inc., with another developer partner, is we understood that there was a lot of public infrastructure investment coming in this area. And we identified that probably in the early 2010, 2011, at which point, we decided to purchase property. Some of them were single family lots, some of them were lots that permitted multifamily use, some were commercial lots. Down the line, when infrastructure started going into place, expansion of the metropolitan area, in this case being Fort Lauderdale to the west, started happening a lot. So when all those ingredients started connecting or started happening, clearly land values started going up. It was a very successful project. Land that we bought in that area, some was developed, other was sold, but the land value itself probably increased 4 or 5 times what we had originally purchased at.
Absolutely. I remember we used to buy parcels, remember, for $35,000.
And that's the significance of that map that you have behind you. That is actually the city of Fort Lauderdale, where, back then, owner by owner, and to see who wanted to sell or not. That's a good reminder of it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we try to accomplish, is to help identify these areas of growth so that we can help landowners also realize and become aware of what's happening in their surroundings, because sometimes they're not aware at all. Tell me one more story or two about other parcels that you have done that have been exciting.
Before I get to that, Monica, I also wanted to bring up to our potential investors and future partners. Part of our experience through the last 23 years has been working with real estate investment trust funds, both directly and indirectly. We worked with Duke Realty, Wayne Garden Realty, Kite Realty. We worked with some of the largest developers in the Fort Lauderdale and Miami area, with the Related Group, with Styles, and many others. Throughout the 23-year tenure of our companies, we've had success stories with them, either being hired directly as consultants or through partnerships in development projects. In addition to that, very, very successful projects that have happened recent with our company, City of Fort Myers, Billy Creek Apartments. I truly believe that's a great success story, not only because of the type of product that we're bringing in into the community, but being able to purchase a property the way we did, being able to go through the entitlement process, increasing the zoning or the density from a single family to multifamily, and being able to develop multifamily units here definitely creates a big value increase on the property. And for those out there that don't understand why, it's very simple. If you have a piece of property where you can put or you can construct 57 units, but you go through an entitlement process that now allows between 96 to 128 units, now you're doubling almost the density. So your property is probably worth twice what you bought it for. Another success story that's very dear to me, it's Riverside on the Catawba. This was a 32-acre parcel that we did a joint venture with the current owners, and we'll talk about how we could partner with landowners also as part of the podcast. Of this property, Monica, when we started negotiating, the current zoning allowed for one dwelling unit per acre. So on 32 acres of property, you could only build 32 homes. This property was part of unincorporated York County, located in the city of Rock Hill, which is considered the fifth largest suburb of the Charlotte metropolitan area, Charlotte, North Carolina. When we came into the process, the first thing that we identified was that in order for the property to have or be served by the utility companies, it had to be annexed to the city of Rock Hill. The property, again, was unincorporated York County. So we went through the annexation process. We were successful in doing that. And once the property was considered incorporated city of Rock Hill, now we had utilities and we could move forward with entitling the land. And that's exactly what we did. We created a beautiful master plan that housed a hotel with 130 doors. We had 300 residential apartments and approximately 200,000 square feet of commercial space, all within the 32 acres. I can tell you that this property, through the entitlement process, went up 3 to 4 times the original value. Those are a few of those success stories that we have been involved with recently.
You go by what the zoning tells you, you look at the surrounding areas. Talk to us a little bit about what goes when you look at these land parcels where you see the opportunity.
I was talking earlier about a canvas, an empty canvas, and we talked about regulations. There has to be a compatibility between the intent of the use and what's existing. The first thing that we look at is that. So if you're in a residential area, most likely an industrial entitlement is not going to work. So once you recognize that, then you try to look at the criteria that's going to allow you to provide the maximum density on the property, because that's what's going to create the most value for the property. And once you identify those, then you start the regulatory process, which in most cases could be a rezoning of the existing property if the uses will allow for a different type of use. It could be a planned unit development, the PUD, which I'm in favor most of the time in conducting those, because you basically set the rules right away on that document. A lot of it comes from the existing regulations that the land development code has, that the planning code has. But a PUD is really a great mechanism of aiding in developing a property in a very efficient way.
You do a PUD in any parcel?
You can do PUDs in, I would say, 99.9% of the parcels. Again, the good thing about the PUD is you adopt a lot of things that are under the current regulation, but there are certain things that might not be efficient or might not be accurate or might hinder the successful development of your property, that by creating that PUD, you can avoid that or you can set aside that from impairing your development.
Let's walk through an example, which is what I try to bring you opportunities. I meet with a landowner that is not necessarily interested in selling because they want to either profit more or build it themselves, etc. Tell me what type of joint ventures you do with these landowners. Walk us through one.
The typical process, Monica, starts with the desire or the need for the landowner of disposing of the property. And as you said, what we want to do with anybody that sells something, you want to obtain maximum value for your property. So what we do is if we talk to the landowner and if the landowner is willing to partner with us, we would create a joint venture. How would this joint venture work? The joint venture will be regulated by an operating agreement, and the operating agreement, we will document what the landowner brings to the table, which clearly is the value of the land. So we would order an appraisal of the property and take it at face value based on that appraisal. That would be the contribution from the landowner. And then the contribution from PDS will be all the entitlement cost and expertise. So we will provide a cost on everything that the entitlement process would need, starting from a surveying of the property, starting from environmental studies, wetland mitigation studies, flood studies. If there's any rezoning required, if there are any PUDs required, then we would cover the cost of planning, execution, and implementation of all this process. Something very important is the operating portion of this, we would have total control of. Clearly, the landowner is our partner, and we're going to consult with them what our intent is. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is provide a development or an entitlement that's compatible with the existing area or the existing surrounding while obtaining maximum property value for everybody involved. Through this process as well, we will clearly go to regulatory agencies, whether it's the county, whether it's the state, whether it's the local municipality. There might be in cases that you are governed by wetlands or in the vicinity of any canals or rivers or waters. Those are regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers, so we would coordinate with them. So at the end of the day, we would have, for example, a piece of property that's agricultural, and we would deliver an entitlement that would change that use to either a residential, a commercial, or a mixed use type level use. And then at that point, or through the joint venture process, what we negotiate with the landowner is a percentage of the excess of the value that was created comes to PDS. Another portion of that excess of value stays with the landowner.
Very interesting because, what I hear, I talk to so many landowners, and usually their obstacle is that they don't have the funds to pay for this process because these processes are very costly. You're talking about paying engineers, surveyors, phase one reports, etc. First, that they don't know how to, maneuver the process, and number two, that is very costly. So in joint ventures like this, where you help landowners add that value to their land, your company run with those costs?
That is correct, Monica. And I'm glad you bring up the cost of it. It's very hard to put into perspective what the cost is. Clearly, every piece of property is different, but I can tell you on the low end, you're probably looking at maybe $300,000-$400,000. We've had cases, for example, Riverside on the Catawba was an entitlement that cost us close to $1 million. We would run with that cost. That would be something that we would contribute. Again, the landowner contributes the land value, the face value of the land based on that appraisal. And then once we get the entitlement, that excess value or generated value would be split between both parties.
And that is what I love about this option because it makes it accessible to a landowner to be able to add that additional value without them having to do anything. And it's very clear for them. Plus, I love that you do an appraisal at the beginning. So it's not like what you said, what the landowner says, it's what a professional says that the land value is as is, and you guys come to an agreement. The landowners ask me, oh, you know what? Well, I could do that myself. Or, it's funny how people don't realize how difficult it is to work with all these different parties that you have to work to do the entitlement. The city, the engineers, the surveyors. I mean, give me an example. In Riverside, side? How long did it take you to do that entitlement?
That entitlement took close to 2 years. When we talk about joining forces with a seller, a landowner, I mean, it's not only me that's at the forefront. I mean, you look at a team of planners, engineers, architects, and from engineering, you need structural, you need environmental, you need your MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We also have a staff of legal experts because a lot of these things have to go through public hearings. So we have to go through planning commissions. We have to go through city commissions. In some cases, we have to go to county commissions also. So there's an interpretation what the regulation is, and we always like to be advised by legal counsel. So they're an active part of our team. So it's not that you're getting somebody that's going to go to the city and ask, what can I do with my property? You're getting a team of experts that's going to ensure that we're going to do our best effort to obtain maximum value on the property.
It's like being the director of an orchestra, right? Because there's all these parties that you got to bring together and make them work. And sometimes, you cannot go to this one until you have the reports from this one, and this one is taking forever. I know that it's a very tedious process. People underestimate the amount of work that it takes to do something like that.
Having such a great team is also very important and crucial for landowners because we don't have to sign anything with a landowner from day one. There's somebody that's interested in going through the process. We can do a quick 2-3 hour assessment and we can tell them, look, we think there's an opportunity or not. So it really doesn't cost you anything picking up the phone and calling and saying, look, I have this piece of property. I'm interested perhaps in a joint venture. So I think we're well equipped to make determinations fairly quickly. I mean, this morning we were on a call with somebody that's interested in purchasing some of our property, and he was concerned with wetlands and many other things. In a 15-minute call, I was able to explain why that concern was not there and get into the specifics of we had already gone through the due diligence. And so I think we have our team of experts, it's in place, and that allows a prompt response. I mean, there is a feel perhaps in the market where if you want to talk to somebody or ask about your property, then it takes weeks and you have to call them back. And so with us, in a very short period of time, you would have a response if that's something that would interest us or not.
That's what it takes. Like you said, it's a team of professionals. It's not just one or two person. That's why it's so important for landowners to make sure that if they are going to be working through this process, that they do find someone that has that type of expertise and team behind them. For landowners that are sitting on the fence, like I talk to so many of them that say, oh, I'm not ready yet. I want to leave this to my children or my grandchildren, or I don't know, or especially with what's going on, talking specifically on the state of Florida. What would you say? What should they be doing?
My advice to those that are on the fence is number one, if your intent is to sell, don't marry the property. They say in the stock market, don't marry stocks. I mean, a lot of us do that. Clearly, we either inherited or we bought it at a period that's significant for us. And so we get tied up emotionally. And the landowner that is tied up emotionally, most likely is not going to sell. My biggest advice is if you are going to sell, you have to detach emotionally. Biggest advice, hire experts. It does not have to be us. It has to be somebody that understands what's going to get you the best value on the property. We get often landowners that, oh no, the city told me I could build 400 lots here. Oh, the city told me that I could do 800 units here. Who did you talk to? No, I told them. Where's the letter? No, they cannot give me a letter. And then we go through the due diligence process, and then we find that the land is restricted by environmental laws that only permit 50 septic tanks. So there goes your area 100 homes, you can only do 50. And then you go to your 400 units, and then the regulation says that the lots have to be 7,000 square feet. And then you go through the size of the property, and you can only fit 160. So the big advice, hire somebody that understands, hire somebody that can guide you properly. Or if you have the time, then educate yourselves, put the effort into it. But it is not an easy process. It's a process that it's so diverse from an infrastructure perspective. Even if the city tells you you can do 400 lots, are you sure that the water and wastewater facility nearby have capacity for your property? Is there electricity available? Is there gas available? Are the roadways big enough to handle the traffic that you're going to be generating with your development or with your property? So those are things that a lot of people or sellers don't look into. And then they have this idea or ideology that, I can do 400 units. I want to get paid for 400 units. But it happens that you have a lot of limitations that really are going to hinder the value of your property.
I remember one parcel in Felda that I was so excited about that. It was like 200 and something acres. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so amazing. We found out that we have to wait for water and sewer to come to the area, which that is going to take God knows how many years. So no, that's a great advice for landowners, and that's what I tell them all the time. I said, look, it doesn't have to be us, but definitely seek advice of people that are knowledgeable in the area, that are going to tell you and show you, and not just go by someone. Sometimes you call the cities, and you can talk to people that are not aware of what really is going on, or are not knowledgeable, and they tell you whatever they want to tell you, and then you find out that that is not the case anyway.
I think something else, Monica, that's very important is looking at 20 some plus years of experience. I found that the landowner will obtain the most value on their property when they have proper entitlement. And by that I mean, if you have a piece of property and it's zoned, or potentially the future land use is multifamily, and then you go out to sell and you say, I can do 90 units in this property, and you want $30,000 per unit, your market value, or you want 2.7 million. That's intrinsic in the sense that you don't have a permit, you don't have an entitlement from the city or from the county. If that same property is entitled, meaning you went through the process and you actually have a document that says you can build 96 units, it's probably not going to sell for 2.7. It may sell for more because developers want to look for property that's entitled. Developers don't want to title the property, because if they pay that 2.7 and then they have to wait a year to entitle it, I mean, that's going to affect their internal rate of return. They rather pay a little bit more if it's entitled than to pay less and having to wait a year and a half for the property to be entitled. So I think entitlement is essential to bring property value and to give interest, or to create interest to those potential buyers of the property.
For the landowners that don't know, I mean, sometimes we assume, just because we work in the industry and we assume that everybody knows this, but a builder is not going to be able to get financing unless the land is entitled. Rarely you need to buy the land cash, you need to do the entitlements cash, and then after you have it entitled is when a lender is going to come in and loan money on the project, which I know sometimes there's variations, but the majority of it is like that. So that's why it's so important. And like you said, it adds so much value when you have the land entitled, and that developer builder can come in and it's shovel ready. They can just get their construction loan and start building without going through the process.
If you are serious about selling property, if you're interested in selling property and you want to obtain the highest value on it, hire an expert, hire us. We have a dedicated team of professionals, engineers, architects, planners, lawyers that will go work for you from day one. Looking into the property, into the potential of the property does not cost you anything. We can, on a very efficient manner, tell you this is a project that would interest us or not in terms of entitlement. So look into, again, hiring professionals, and we're here to help if you need us.
Do you own land or would like to invest in land? Reach out to the land entitlement experts. Someone like Luis and his team will give you a free assessment of what your land is worth.